Hello and welcome to Adventures in Venueland, an EVMC podcast. Join us for this all-access pass backstage and behind the scenes with some of the brightest minds that cross the scope of the live event industry. I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. We'll introduce you to incredible guests who journey with us as we dive deep into the world of venues, tours, festivals, and everything in between. Grab your laminate and meet us in Venueland.
Hello and welcome to a special detour episode of Adventures in Venueland, an EVMC podcast. I'm Dave Rettelberger, and along with my co-host Paul Hooper, today's episode is a little bit different, a detour or a side trip where we take a single serving look at a fun event or something interesting happening in the world of live entertainment. And it's a new year. And we talk about the new year. Boy, there's nothing bigger than New Year's Eve in Times Square. What does it take to put on a New Year's Eve party in New York City in 2024, it's slashed into 25, and no shortage of logistics. I think if all of us, anybody who's ever worked in events, has always been curious about this one, and today we're going to learn a little bit more. Paul, would you be so kind as to introduce our guest?
Yeah, of course. So we're joined by Damian Santucci. He is the Senior Vice President of Production and Operations for Times Square Alliance. Damian, welcome and thanks for joining us. And we're excited to hear all about it. As Dave said, it's the pinnacle event of New Year's Eve, and it's got to be really exciting to be involved in it.
It is. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you for bringing me on. And yeah, man, it's a wacky one. It's an all hands on deck, hands full night.
We're obviously recording after this New Year's Eve event, and so
you were a little busy before.
You were a little bit, yeah, of course. And we want to hear about after the what went into it, right? But what is that like? Do you guys just take like 3 or 4 days and go into hibernation to recover from that one? I mean, I have to imagine there's this massive build up to it, and then there's just this deep exhale afterwards, like we made it happen.
Yeah, pretty much. It's but we have to load it out first. Right. So that's the we're probably we get the first off, which is the holiday, right? Technically, but even though we still have crews on the ground that are loading out everything, and we don't get fully loaded out of all of our equipment until the 6th. But that's all side street stuff, pods, all the last minute stuff. To the naked eye, we're back to normal by the 3rd. So I'd say right around the 3rd, the 4th. I still have a couple of crews on the ground doing all the small stuff, but other than that, like that's when you try to grab a day or two and kind of try not to get off the couch and let it all sink in, and but yeah, catch up on some sleep. It's quite a month.
Well, before we get into this event, before we were talking, you've actually got quite a history in Venueland. So you've kind of grown up in venues here in the New York area.
Yeah. Madison Square Garden is kind of a home venue for me. I was an intern in college, 2002, 2003, my last year of college. I graduated in 2003 from Fordham University at Lincoln Center. And I interned for the New York Knicks in event presentation in the 2002-03 season. That was the year we retired Patrick Ewing's jersey. And that was kind of my first hurrah into arena management. Always been a big sports fan, always been, in some sort of entertainment, either as a performer or backstage. And I kind of fell in love with it from there on out. I worked for the Knicks for a few years. Then I started directing college sports. Where, if anybody that watches a basketball game, you see the scores table where they have your announcer and your scorers and your stat people. And in the center is usually somebody with a headset on who's directing the whole show. So and I direct college sports at the Garden for 20 years now, from 2004. So I still do that to this day on the side. I still love doing it. At the Garden's my home arena. So we do a lot of St. John's, the Big East tournament, the NCAAs. We do the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 every couple of years. Then I worked for the Rangers. I used to direct Ranger games for a couple of years. Then I went into the building end and production and operations, became head draftsman and started designing all floor setups and games and everything that's coming into Madison Square Garden and the theater. So I was in production and operations for a few years, and then came to Times Square. And I've been here ever since, and got 15 years now. So this was my 16th New Year's.
Before you
Wow.
started, with Times Square, what's your history with the event? Did you attend as or was it something that you had always kind of had on your bucket list, or before you dreamed of working there? What was you just watching it on TV?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I always watched it on TV. It was always obviously the thing to do, especially as a New Yorker. But, that was, my oldest memories of New Year's Eve was, growing up. It was kind of the day that my mother and my father would, send my sister and I to my grandparents, and that was their date night, and they went
Sure.
out, for New Year's Eve, and we'd be at my grandparents, and my grandparents and my aunt and uncle lived in the Bronx, and we would. It was a very Bronx thing to do. I was raised in Westchester, a little outside the Bronx, a little more of a suburb. But when we go to the Bronx, all I knew was going on the porch and banging pots and pans.
Yeah.
With a wooden spoon and a pot, and you bang the pot and pan, and everybody in the whole neighborhood was banging pots and pans at midnight, and so that was my oldest memory, watching the ball drop and Dick Clark. And then the year before, I was hired. Before I was interviewed, before this was even a thought, it goes to show it's all about connections. My old boss that actually hired me at the New York Knicks in 2002, his name was Gary Winkler. He had left the Knicks. I think he left around the '07 or '08, and he came to Times Square. And he was now brand new there, and he was in marketing. And they had an event. We still have it. Leading up to New Year's, we had these kind of pre-events, these small kind of pre-things to get a lot of hoopla and jazz leading up to New Year's. And one of
Sure,
them is
sure.
called Good Riddance Day, where some press come out and people come out and say good riddance to something in this year that's about to go out. And
Yeah.
so one day he called me and he said, I was still at the Garden. He said, listen, we got this Good Riddance Day thing. I need like a stand-in. I need an actor. I need somebody to come in and do an early press hit with me. Like you're saying good riddance to something. Bring something you want to smash. We're going to have a mat. We're going to have a mallet that you can smash and say good riddance to whatever. He said, would you do me this favor, And so, yeah, I did it for
We've
him.
all been there. Yep.
It was great. I went out 6 a.m. and I said good riddance to whatever it was. And we were on TV and we did the whole thing as part of this little promo event. And then he says, well, listen, I can't pay you, but I can offer you tickets to our official New Year's Eve party, which at that point was, right outside, right in our building. At the bottom of our building was we had a visitor center at the time. It's now the Pele store on 7th Avenue between 46th and 47th. But we used to have a big party there. Employees, mayor's office people, friends and family, and then there's a big party inside, and you can come outside in a private pen to then watch the ball drop with all the other people. And so I said, sure, I'll come. It'd be super cool. I've actually, all my years growing up in New York, I've never been to New Year's Eve. Most New Yorkers don't go.
Right.
So I was like, I get a good excuse to go. I can do it kind of VIP style where I'm inside. There's a bathroom. I can come out and do whatever.
Yeah.
And it was magical. It was the expectation was better than I could imagine it was. And that's kind of what got me. I was like, but what an amazing experience. The way that I did it was super amazing too, but I remember it being an unbelievably cold night. It was a very cold night, but I think what I remember the most about that first night as a guest was the curation of, and it's similar now, but it's changed a little bit. The curation of what they did. We usually have ABC, our last big act is like 11:40-ish, right?
Sure.
And right around 11:50, right before the ball drops, right around 11:55, 11:56, everyone has come out and we've been drinking inside and we're having a blast and with a friend and we're having a good time. And all of a sudden, right around 11:56, you just hear the piano start in all of Times Square, all the PA system. You just hear the piano start at the beginning of John Lennon's Imagine. And it was the most bone-chilling, but the hair on my arms are raising right now. Like just the hair-raising moment where this beautiful, beautiful moment of sharing this space with all of these people in this symbolism of, letting the old go and bringing the in new, but doing it together with peace and harmony. And it was a beautiful, beautiful moment. And I'm just like tears in my eyes. What am I experiencing? And the song ends with, the 60-second countdown, the button hitting, and then the ball dropping. And it was a blast after that. I don't remember too much after that because I had too good of a time. And then little did I realize it was a few months later that I got a phone call from I got an email from the secretary or assistant from the Times Square Alliance, the president of the alliance at the time, Tim Tompkins, and it was like, "Hey, we have a position, and I'm interested in you." And I was obviously suggested by Gary, who still works here with me after all these years, and here we are.
That's amazing. I mean, when you're looking at this event, I think anyone knows when you've got a big event like this, you're planning for it year round. It's not a month out. It's not 2 months out. It is really probably more than a year out. You're already thinking before this one, already brainstorming the next one. Like I was hearing news bits about the new ball that's coming, for the next year. And so, I know working for the city here, we obviously have a lot of, big outdoor parades and things like that, but nothing on the scale of, New York and Times Square. And, what is that big difference of going from planning a big event in the Garden, which of course is, its own massive arena, the most, world's most famous arena, but now you're in the middle of Times Square. How do you get your arms around that when you start this job? Are you kind of like thrown into the trenches and you're like, it just seems like there's 100 things and 100 places that all have to hit at the right time.
Yeah, great point. It was, when I was hired, and I believe my first week was end of Thanksgiving. So I was hired right before
You're
New
jumping in.
Jumped right into New Year's. I had no idea what I was doing, but I grasped it and I did what I thought I needed to do, right? And it was a lot of just kind of learning on the fly that year. But, going from the Garden to Times Square, you're going from, and I've kind of wrapped my brain around this and, kind of said it a few times, is left the world's busiest private space to go to the world's busiest public space, right up the street. And the biggest, this is the obvious part of it, and any event person understands this, is number one, it being outdoors.
Sure.
Is a total, the Garden is 70 degrees, 72 degrees and dry all the time.
Yep,
And the biggest part is that it's a 24-hour public space that never closes. And so building this size show around in holiday season, which is Times Square's busiest time for pedestrian traffic, we're trying to build this show every day with 375 to 400,000 people walking through a day. And with cold weather, rain, snow, whatever it's going to be in December, those are the biggest challenges. And those are actually the biggest challenges on an everyday basis for the hundreds of event permits that we have coming in from the city, from the hundreds of, we probably get in a year, I'm in around 300 film and event permits that come through Times Square a year. So every one of those permits go through a city system. They come through my desk, and I work with the city, with all these event producers and film agencies to put these events on in all of these pedestrian spaces we have here. And the hardest part of all of it is doing it in the middle of all these people, the crowd control aspect is the number one thing that we do for New Year's and security. And I'll say of all the city, it's such a big show that no one group or one company or one person is responsible for it all. It's so every city agency between Department of Transportation, Department of Buildings, Sanitation, the NYPD, us, Department of Emergency Management, anybody and everybody is involved in this event.
Well, let's talk about your organization a little bit, because you mentioned it by name, but what is this? How many people are there, and what do you guys do around the year?
Sure. We are the Times Square Alliance, and the Times Square Alliance is the business improvement district that runs Times Square. So there's a lot of business improvement districts all around the country, in cities and all around New York City. So you'll see like the Downtown Association, the Fifth Avenue BID, Business Improvement District. So we are funded and organized by all the property owners and business owners in Times Square. And, in short, this was around 90, 91, 92. All the property owners in Times Square went to the mayor's office and said, hey, we have the busiest place in the world. We have the highest rents, and, we want it to look better. We want it to look cleaner. We want it to do this, blah, blah, blah. And they said, form a bid. So all the property owners got together, they formed a board, they formed this bid, and they have all decided based on their square footage, based on their businesses, whatever it is, they all give an assessment. That assessment is our budget, and it forms the Times Square Alliance. So our company runs Times Square. So we are funded by the property owners, but we are sanctioned by the city to be a partner-ish with the city. We're a nonprofit organization, so we partner with the Department of Transportation. We have our own sanitation division, which is responsible for the cleanliness of the streets. We have our own public safety division, which are non-weapon carrying, working in conjunction with the police department on public safety on the street. And then we have a marketing department, an events department, PR, finance, anything to put on anything in Times Square, to promote Times Square, for it to be a family-friendly place, to help all of our stakeholders in around the area is our first and foremost thing. So we're one of the biggest bids in the city, one of the biggest bids in the country, and this obviously being our biggest event. So for myself, I started out as the manager of public space when Times Square used to be a bow tie. They still call it the bow tie, where 7th Avenue and Broadway cross. Used to be two vehicular streets and forming this bow tie. And we had these kind of little islands where they're only pedestrian areas. 2008, I believe it was, the Department of Transportation and us decided to close Broadway and have these big pedestrian spaces now. So now we have these Broadway plazas where now we're only 7th Avenue is vehicular traffic. So these formed these spaces to be able to do things, spaces to program, spaces for the city to permit. So now they're part of the street activity permits office, permits these things that people want. And now film office, we have a lot more film shoots. So programming that, keeping the space clean, safe is part of my job. And now over the years, I've built a department of production and operations where we are handling everything that happens on the street. And obviously everything for us culminates with New Year's Eve.
And for this event, give us some numbers, some nerdy numbers, if you have them handy. I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of confetti. I can't imagine the amount of work hours. I mean, I love it, and I'm amazed that I saw some really cool PR, just how fast the cleanup crew was able to get this confetti and the street basically back in working order immediately, not immediately, but, very quickly after, not immediately,
so to speak.
So to speak. Yes, exactly. And it's very impressive of not only the scale of course, stages and performances and Carrie Underwood's out there and everything, but you then just have all these things hitting, right? All the digital boards seem to be coordinated and hitting at the same time. You've got the ball, of course. You've got all these things, give us the nerdy numbers.
Where should I start? I think so one of the things you touched on was just how fast it gets cleaned. I mean, this event, the majority of this event is on the police department. The police department and then sanitation, the New York City Sanitation Division to clean. And the ball drops at 12:01 or 12 o'clock. At 12:25, Times Square is cleared. Of 12:25, 12:30, there's and I say nobody there, but 90% of the space is gone. People have been waiting for hours. Like, get me out of here. We're done. We're finished. We dropped 3,000 pounds of confetti. It's all hand dropped from, no machines. So it's all hand dropped from building rooftops and building and office buildings along the way with a large crew of people that have, bags and bags of confetti. And we just drop it hand. And then the Department of Sanitation comes in with their crew 12:45, say. And then we have a whole crew starting loadout immediately. That crew goes to 6 a.m. If you were to walk through at 6:30 in the morning, 5 hours, 6 hours after the ball dropped, yes, obviously there's still some staging up there. So you would know something happened here.
Yeah.
But you would not believe that it's the same space you watched on TV with, millions of pieces of confetti and 1 million people and, half this infrastructure that's now been gone on the ground. The Department of Sanitation cleans the space. You would not know anything happened by day 2. It's pretty unbelievable. And we have all streets open, all Broadway plazas open. Business returns to usual at 6:30 in the morning. Um, so that's for me, that's the most amazing part of it all the
Yeah.
time. We hit the ground running at on the 26th, day after Christmas. That's when we start building all of our stages. We have our main stage on Duffy Square, Broadway between 46, 47. We have a secondary stage on Broadway between 45th and 46th, and then we have another compound for Dick Clark Productions, ABC Studios between 43rd and 44th. All of our side streets are packed with TV trucks, pods, production parking. Cables are flown all up and down with temporary poles all up and down the square. Cabling, we start earlier in the month, but really we hit the ground running on the 26th where we build everything with shifts that go day and night shifts through. And then, the 30th, we get to rehearsal day. So all of these days, and anybody in the event world knows that you always break things down faster than they go up.
Of course.
But the fact that we have everything opened for the public at 6:30 in the morning, right afterward is pretty amazing. And I cannot nod our technical producer and our crews and the Department of Sanitation and the police department for what they do to get everything back to normal. And I think that's the biggest part. That's what I mean. The kind of the differences between an inside and an outside venue is the biggest aspect of this venue is security. And what the numbers that the police department throws, we have over 3,000 cops
Wow.
at this event. And so they're pulling cops. The police department pulls cops from every borough. Every
Right.
borough,
Yep,
even
sure.
cops that have never, had to, do anything in Manhattan or in Times Square because they've been in Brooklyn or Queens or the Bronx. They pull for as many places as they need to pull. And then New Year's Eve is also the very first event, the very first detail for all the brand new recruits that just
Yep.
graduated the
It's
academy.
automatic.
So they
Yeah,
graduate
exactly.
the academy, I believe. I mean, the data
You're
was
working New Year's Eve, rookie. Yeah.
they graduate the academy in mid-December.
Yeah.
So, they just gone through everything. They graduate, great. They say, congratulations, you're a cop. Here's your badge. Go home for the holiday, and then report on New Year's Eve. That's your first thing. So you have these brand new cops, hundreds of them. 700 brand new cops are like, all right, what am I doing? And they are directed so well. There's so many checkpoints to get all of these people in an orderly fashion, to wand them, to go through security checkpoints, and to make this as orderly as possible. And it's always hard to say, but you got to look at both ends of it, right? As wonderful as this event is, as popular as it is, there also comes with very negatives to that, which are it's the number one target, right, for
Sure.
terrorism,
Yeah.
for bad things to happen. And the police department looks at this weeks and months and throughout the year out, and they are prepared. There are things that happen in the police department that I don't know, that no one knows, right? That they do their
Right.
preparation. We do our production preparation, and the police department does all of their security preparations. So, yeah, I mean, numbers wise, we talk about kind of some geeky numbers. It's like, how many people are actually out there? That's always to be debated. When we talk about the million number, it's usually a million people say descended onto Times Square, and that might include people on the street, people in hotels, people who live there, people that go to office buildings for office parties, all the restaurants, and hotels that are, so there's not
Yeah,
a
you have to
million.
imagine any window that looks out on Times Square becomes
Anyone
an
who can
immediate
see it.
party space. Yeah, exactly. It's like
Yeah.
you have your own VIP club. What if you have an apartment there? It's everyone's kind of got a good view of the action.
Yeah, yeah. It's every office building is jammed, and then restaurants or bars have they all have VIP parties, and it is the hotel's biggest night. Every
Yep,
hotel
sure.
in Times
Yeah.
Square, it is by far their biggest night. They are booked. I don't know how far in advance they're allowed to book, but they're booked 1 to 2 years in advance all the time.
One of the things that, is interesting when I see the overhead shots is it's almost like, you're producing two shows. There's the one for the folks watching on TV, and there's another thing. And the way the stages stuff is set up, it's set up wonderfully for TV, but not necessarily great for people on site. So what have you guys done for the people on site that come and they stand out there for 12, 14 hours? We see, 30 minutes from 11:30 to midnight, and maybe some of the pre-show that's taped in Los Angeles or whatever. But what's a day like for those folks?
Great question. And that is the thing that we every year we talk about planning, Paul, a year in advance, a little more. That is the thing that's been our hot topic for the last, say, 4 or 5 years, is making it a better experience for the people on the ground. It is, Dave, you're right. It's 100% a show made for TV. It's the most viewed event worldwide, impressions wise, streaming wise, and viewed in the world every year. There's billions of people who watch it, and that's because we don't have one network. We have 30 plus networks. And our belief is that this event should be open to the public and open to all media streams and open to the entire world. So we don't sell it to one, like the Oscars or the Super Bowl or the Golden Globes
Right.
that, one network buys it. So everyone's watching one thing. It is streamed throughout the world on, 30 networks that are here, but hundreds of networks throughout the world. And so this show originally, before, I believe, it was the mid 90s, before 95, before we had any sort of actual show, it was just people showing up. And that's been like that since 1907, right? The first time that ball dropped. And really since 1903, I believe, was the first time people started gathering to do it. But the first ball drop was 1907. And for years, people just showed up. There was nothing happening out there. There was no sound, there were no events, there was no performances. People just showed to bring in the new year together, and they would dip in and out of bars and restaurants and this and that. People were drinking on the street, and it was just this big thing. Then we started doing, with partnership with Countdown Entertainment, which is a company that works hand in hand with Jamestown, which is One Times Square. One Times Square is the building where the ball drops.
Right.
And so we started a partnership with Countdown Entertainment to put on some sort of a show. So it started out as a little small stage with a little performance and a stand-up. But this was anything happening. This was the first time we did something on the ground with sound for anybody on the ground to listen to. Otherwise, for 30, 40 years before that, it was Dick Clark from some sort of setback that turned on at 11:30. He had a 30-minute review of the year. He brought in the new year, and then it was done by, say, 12:15. But Dick Clark was New Year's Eve. But that was the first view anybody ever got of New Year's Eve on television, but it was just TV. So the people that are there now, they start this small event, small stage, first time people heard stuff in the square, and it got a little bit bigger and bigger every year. 9/11. After 9/11 became a very big security thing. So now, as the event, the same amount of people come every year. So now the police department, we have a bigger security plan, how we wand people. There are barricaded and organized pens that everyone goes in. How do they get in and out of them? Then at the same time, our show became bigger and bigger. And it, by default, became more about TV. So our stages are elevated. They're covered. They're perfect for press. All the press are up there. There's an audience riser. There's the stage. There are triple level of press riser, and it's at a certain level so you can get the perfect shot of the ball in Times Square in the back. And the hard thing is all of these people are on the ground, and it's a little difficult for them to see these performances. It's not like a music festival where you come and you run to the front of the stage, and if you're there first, you can get that front row seat. If you come here first, there are people on a warm year. If it's going to be a 50-degree New Year's, there are people that'll line up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they don't necessarily know what they're lining up for. They're lining up because they want to get in. Okay, great, we're going to get into Times Square and do this thing. They finally go through security wanting, and then they run as fast as they can to the front of
The barricade.
They don't even know what they're running
yeah,
to the front.
Yeah.
The police
Right.
department is dictating where everybody goes, right? And there's,
right.
we fill this pen first and this pen first. And then there's some people that get there and they get a little confused and they go, oh, but I want to be closest to the stage. How do I get there? And it's a big event that we're always trying to say, how can we make it better for the people on the ground? So we added bigger sound. We added a couple more partners with screens where people can see some of these performances, because they can't see much
I
from.
saw that a lot this year. Yeah.
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 And so we've talked about things. We've talked about ways. How do we explore maybe changing the stages a little bit, bringing them a little further toward the ground? rethinking the event as a whole. Maybe we change everything. Maybe we move how we do any of this entertainment. Those are all big ideas that happen every year.
Sure.
And
I'm
then
sure. Yeah.
yeah, every year. How do we make
Yep.
it? How do we change this? But
let's start it
progressive
all
baby
over.
steps.
And then they're
Yeah,
like, well, maybe we
exactly.
don't do it.
But we have these big ideas every year,
Of
and
course, yeah.
these steps we do little by little. So now we started with this marching band. Now we have a marching band that comes down that is not for TV. That's only for the people on the ground to give them some sort of entertainment.
Cool.
And this year the police department let people in a little bit later than usual. In the past years, we've let people in, depending on how many people are backed up waiting to get in, 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, sometimes by 12:30, 1 o'clock, all those plazas are packed. So now you have people sitting there waiting for 10, 11, 12 hours. This year, they tried something a little bit different, and they brought people in, and they security wanded people through checkpoints 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. So now people have a morning. They can go to lunch. They can now, not prepare themselves to wait a little less time than more time, especially everyone was looking at rain. People knew rain was coming.
Sure.
So I think that was an experience this year, which, some say it worked, some say it didn't. I actually liked it for the purpose that people were waiting out there such a less time. Our streaming show starts at 6 p.m. And that's a long show, 6 to 12. But any camera show, any network show, their shows are starting much later. So we do that to put a much bigger show out for sound for people on the ground, so they can be somewhat entertained and hear more and participate in more. So they're not out there for all these hours with nothing happening, And it's okay. It was okay for that in the past when we really didn't have much of an event, because people had a lot more room to move around. They could say, all right, I'm out here for a little bit. Let's go duck into this bar and have a drink. Let's go duck into this restaurant and grab a bite. We can always come back. There's a lot more free flowing, and even though it was super packed,
Yeah, sure.
right, you could move around freely. For security purposes now, once they're in, they're in.
You're in. Yep.
Yeah.
And you can't leave. If you leave, then the police department, once they shut down the security checkpoints in the wanding, if you decide to leave, you can't get back in. And it's unfortunate, but in the world that we live in, for security purposes, it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Totally.
Everyone has to be screened. That comes through, from 6th Avenue and 8th Avenue. Anyone that gets inside the boats has got to be screened. So it's getting better every year for the experience on the ground, but it's always something that we're looking to get better for. So people really want to come and experience the entire night. At the end of the day, no matter what happens when they get in from 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock to 11:55, the star of the show is the ball. People are there to watch the ball drop. They're there for the 10 minutes of 11:55 to 12:05. That's really the magic. And it's tough before that. It's tough after that. Even if you're out there and you do get a front row seat to some performances, you're still out there in the elements, not moving anywhere, for hours and hours. And if it's snow, you're getting snowed on. If it's 15 degrees, it's hard. You're in pain. If it's raining, you're soaked. It's every bit of the.
That's probably part of the experience, though, right? It's like when people go to a music festival, they kind of, maybe I'm going to get rained on, but I'm out here with a lot of people. Yeah. It's a unique experience. Of course, you're not hoping for that, but if you're there, it is what it is. And obviously, you all had a little rain, but it parted and cleared, or it seemed to clear by the time, which is great. And I mean, I think, that's part of, people I'm sure have a little bit of a higher tolerance, because they're like, I'm here in Times Square, even if I'm dealing with snow or wind or whatever it is, that's just the experience. It's the story I'm going to tell everyone.
That's what we hear all the time. So we do a lot of, throughout the day, as I'm walking up and down walking up and down the square, and I'm looking at all these pens of these thousands of people, and you see the same people as you're walking up and down up against the barricade. You watch this, you watch their face evolve and change throughout the hours. They're super excited at first, and then throughout the hours they get a little more tired. They're leaning up against the barricade. They're on the ground. You see this kind of evolution, and then as you get closer, that hour or two, they start to get their energy back up. And I remember, every once in a while, I'll stop and I'll talk to some of these people. Where are you from? How far did you come to do this? This is a bucket list item, blah, blah, blah. And no matter how hard the night is, I've never had anybody say that it was a mistake. They all said this was the most amazing thing in the world. This was a bucket list item for me. It was better than I could ever experience. And from, a jaded New Yorker who looks at this, and any New Yorker looks at this and go, you couldn't drag me there. There's no way in hell I'll do it, blah, 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 blah. To hear from that, from that jaded New Yorker sense, to hear the love and appreciation and the real magic experience that people that don't get to experience this New York energy all the time, how difficult it is for them to really love the show. And I've met people out there that have come multiple years, that travel from wherever they're from to come, and because they just love that energy so much. And the energy between 11:55 to 12:05, that 10 minutes is, no matter how many years I do it, it's magic. It's magic.
It gives you chills even watching on TV,
Yeah,
which is
for
so
sure.
wild because you're not even there, but you're seeing the reaction of all these
It comes through the
people.
TV.
It
Yeah.
really comes through the TV and the ball, like you mentioned. I think that's part of the magic. And let's maybe talk about the ball.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can't probably hit on maybe some of the stuff with the new one that's going to be coming, but that's a pretty cool part of it, right? And you all have some of the historic ones. Did I read somewhere that you all sort of like have them in this secret ball vault in the basement, or maybe one stored in your closet, or I don't know, but tell us about that.
Yeah, we used to have, I don't remember, let's see if I can get the right stat. What ball we currently have now. This might be like I'm going to say the wrong amount, but this might be like the fifth one or sixth ball.
Sure.
There are balls that, from the early 1900s that obviously nobody has. They were either dismantled or not kept of record. We do have the Millennium Ball from 2000. We used to have that in our visitor center, where people could go and take photos with it. That was a smaller ball. Now it's this current ball that is about to get replaced is 12 foot in diameter. It's 11,800-ish pounds.
Wow.
We have 2,600, we get this number right, 2,688 crystals, which
is so cool. Yeah, I read, you probably have one right on your desk and you're showing us. Did I read that there was some sort of
I gotta see this thing. I gotta see this.
There was like an activation where they had like fans, or maybe it was a VIP thing. They had fans come and change the crystals, and they got to take one home. I was like, what a cool way to like engage and get people a part of something that who would have thought of that? But like, come swap out the crystals with us, and you can take this home with you to wherever you are in the country or in New York. And I just thought that was so cool.
It was a great idea. We had it from our partners at Jamestown and One Time Square, who own the building and the ball. We did this kind of joint event where every year we swapped the crystals out. We used to have our sponsor, crystal sponsor, and this year the idea was, let's give away these old crystals. So we brought X amount of parts of the wall down to the Broadway plazas, and it was free and open to the public, and we gave away 700, I believe. So the first 700 people that showed up were able to swap one out, take one home, kind of a
That's so cool.
It's fantastic. It was really great. People went nuts over them. It's kind of a once in a lifetime thing. It's such a famous, it's the most famous ball in the world, right? But it's such a famous thing, and for people to put a hook around it and put it on their Christmas tree, or display it on their bookshelf somewhere, it's really kind of something special that people loved.
And so tell us about the new one. What can you tell us, or why is it even time for a new ball?
That's a great question. I think our partners at One Time Square wanted to make a new ball. They renovated the entire building, so I think it's a part of the new building, the launch of the new building, the launch of the new. Here we go, and let's do it with they redid the whole roof, so it's going to be a little bit bigger. So I don't know how many crystals are going to be on it, but I think it's going to be 13 or 14 foot in diameter rather than 12. So it's going to be a bigger ball. Could be up to 15. This current ball is going to be on display when they open the One Time Square building in a museum. And then there's going to be a whole kind of Times Square museum, New Year's Eve museum, where you can kind of walk through the years and, look how things has evolved. But the ball's phenomenal. I mean, the programming. The programming with LED technology that's possible now, and it used to be the old days with screw-in light bulbs.
Yeah.
And and it was all and the thing was joisted by hand, hoisted up and down by hand. And now with the LED light technology and the crystal technology, it can be turned into anything. You can turn it into a globe, you can turn it into a soccer ball, you can turn it into whatever. The what our programmers are able to do with it is really phenomenal.
That's awesome.
I know I'm so geeked out by all of this that I think I can talk to you for like hours, but I know your time's precious. Let me ask you one last question that I think a lot of our people listening may have after our discussion today, which is, and I'm sure you get this from family or friends out of state, and they say, "Hey, I'm thinking about coming. You got any advice for me?" And like as if it's like, "Oh yeah, just make sure you turn left at Mackenzie."
Yeah. So if it's family and friends or a client or business, we, as the Times Square Alliance, we have a family and friend area, where we are able to bring a small amount of clients and people where they say, we're on a list, I can bring in a little bit later, kind of the perks of the job.
Yeah, just like the arena, yeah,
do this. If it's a random person that's like, hey, I'm going to come and do this, how do I do it? It's I will give everybody, and I will say, it is an absolute once in a lifetime bucket list energy that you can't even imagine, but you got to work for that energy. It's hard.
Right.
It's
be prepared.
100% prepared. You're going to go through the elements. You're going to sit for a while. You don't have a bathroom to go to. Prepare your body don't put a lot of water in your body. Don't overeat. Give you certain places to go. Check in from 6th Avenue, check in at 8th Avenue. It's safe. It's a safe event. There's more law enforcement there that night than anywhere. Come experience it, bundle up, bring your poncho, go through a little bit of a tough waiting period to experience something that you cannot experience anywhere else.
Let me tell you, every year since as long as I can remember, we watched from home, and this year my 22-year-old went over to his new girlfriend's house and celebrated New Year's, and he called me the next day. He's like, "Dad, they didn't watch the ball drop." It wasn't the same, and I was like, so it is such an important. It's I mean, it from being there in person, and you hear it. I'm sure you hear it all the time, but it's such an important part and such an important milestone for so many people. And I love what you guys are doing there, and I really appreciate taking the time to let us inside the world a little bit. Really enjoyed today's conversation.
Yeah, thank you guys. I feel like we've been talking for 50 minutes, and I feel like I didn't even touch the tip of the iceberg on all the ins and outs, but it's really wonderful. I can't recommend it to you and your families and your listeners enough. It's magic. It's magic that Disney can't produce. It's kind of wonderful stuff. But please come be our guest. Come to Times Square. Come eat at our restaurants and go see a show. And come to New Year's Eve. We're here. Look me up.
There you go. Amazing.
Oh, that's just wonderful. Really appreciate the time today, and a big thanks to everybody for listening to this special detour episode of Adventures in Venueland. Remember, you can subscribe and find more episodes wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We do love your 5-star reviews. It helps others find us. Until the next adventure, I'm Dave Rettelberger.
And I'm Paul Hooper. Thanks for listening, everyone. Adventures in Venueland is a side project of the Event and Venue Marketing Conference, a marketing conference that brings together diversified event and venue professionals to cultivate education, collaboration, and innovation for the growing sports and live entertainment industry. Find out more at eventvenuemarketing.com.
Audio editing and mixing by Camille Faulkner.
Design and digital advertising by Megan Ebeck.
Copywriting and publicity by Samantha Marker.
Guest booking and brand strategies by Paul Hooper.
Guest research by Dave Rettelberger.
Marketing strategies by Paul Hooper, Megan Ebeck, and Samantha Marker. Thanks for joining us. Until the next adventure.